It started with the sound of a hose. Jeanne Covey was sitting on her front porch while her mom sprayed her down with cold water. She couldn't make it to the bathroom anymore. This was the only way she could get clean. It wasn't just uncomfortable to watch, it was heartbreaking. That one scene told viewers everything they needed to know. This episode was going to be rough. My 600-pound life has shown a lot of tough situations over the years. Viewers have seen people stuck in bed, eating themselves into worse health, and struggling to turn their lives around. But Jeanne's story was different. It wasn't just about her weight. It was about how bad things had gotten around her too. Her home, her family, her mental state.
And about being molested. For both of them, she said, "Why didn't I tell her sooner?" And my answer was, because I was scared that she wouldn't believe me.
Her episode didn't have a big success story or a hopeful ending. Instead, it gave a real and disturbing look at what happens when everything falls apart. The hygiene, the sadness, and the chaos made it one of the most talked about and hardest to watch episodes in the entire series. Just a quick note, I'm building this channel toward 1,000 subs. If you want to be part of that journey, hit subscribe. Before Jeanne ever appeared on My 600-Pound Life, her situation was already serious. She was living in a small town in Oklahoma, mostly confined to her bed or a recliner, and she relied heavily on her parents to help her with basic things like getting up, eating, and cleaning herself. Jeanne had been overweight since she was a child, but over the years, things had gotten worse. By the time the show found her, she weighed over 600 pounds and could barely walk. Jeanne lived with her parents, and while they cared about her deeply, their home was far from a healthy environment. Her mom was her full-time caregiver, and her dad often tried to keep the peace in the house. But the family dynamics were stressful. There were animals everywhere, dogs, cats, and the house was messy and cluttered. It was clear they were overwhelmed and struggling just to keep things together day by day. Her weight wasn't the only issue. Jeanne had also dealt with emotional problems for years. She mentioned that food became a comfort for her early on in life. Whenever she was sad, anxious, or bored, she ate. Over time, that habit grew into something much more serious. It became a cycle she couldn't break. The more she ate, the worse she felt. And the worse she felt, the more she ate. One thing that stood out early in the episode was how isolated Jeanne had become. She didn't have a social life. She didn't go out. She barely even left her room. Her world had shrunk to the few rooms inside her house and whatever interactions she had with her parents. That kind of isolation only made her depression and eating habits worse. Jeanne knew she needed help. She wanted to see Dr. Nasruddin in Houston and start the process of changing her life. But even getting to that first appointment seemed like a huge challenge. From the very beginning, viewers could tell this wasn't going to be a typical weight loss journey. What really made Jeanne Covey's episode stand out, and why so many people called it the most disgusting one, was the state of her living conditions. Viewers were shocked from the moment cameras entered her home. The inside of the house was dark, cluttered, and filled with animals. Dogs barked in the background. Cat litter sat out in the open. The mess wasn't just in one room, it was everywhere. Trash, old food containers, and animal waste made it clear that keeping the house clean wasn't a priority anymore. It looked like a place where people had simply given up. Then there was Jeanne's personal hygiene. Because she couldn't fit in the bathtub or shower anymore, and her legs hurt too much to stand for long, she hadn't properly bathed in months. The only way she could get clean was by sitting on the porch and having her mother hose her down like a car. It was humiliating and sad to watch, and even more disturbing when you realize this was their normal routine. The scene with the hose is probably what stuck with most viewers. It wasn't staged or dramatized, it was just raw, uncomfortable reality. Jeanne's mom tried to be gentle, but there was no dignity in the process.
I took her to nutritionists, dietitians, but none of that helped. She kept gaining the weight.
Jeanne sat there, wet and quiet, while flies buzzed around. It felt like something out of a documentary about poverty and neglect. In one part of the episode, Jeanne's mom explained that she did the best she could. She said they didn't have the resources to hire help, and Jeanne was too heavy to move around much. Still, it was clear they were overwhelmed and didn't know how to handle the situation. They had gotten used to living like that, even though it wasn't healthy or safe. The living room Jeanne spent most of her time in had stains on the carpet, piles of stuff stacked against the walls, and no signs of any kind of regular cleaning. With her limited mobility, she stayed in one spot most of the day, often eating while lying down or watching TV. The way she described it, days blended together. There wasn't much to look forward to. She was stuck in her body and stuck in her environment. For many people watching, the hygiene issues were the hardest part. It wasn't just about being overweight, it was about what happens when someone is physically and emotionally stuck, and everyone around them is too exhausted or too unsure to do anything about it. Jeanne Covey wasn't just struggling with her weight, she was dealing with serious medical issues that were putting her life at risk. Carrying over 600 pounds made it hard for her to move, breathe, or even sleep. She had constant pain in her legs and back. Simple things like standing up or walking to the bathroom felt impossible. She spent most of her time in a recliner, and even getting out of it took help from her mom. Doctors warned her that if she didn't lose weight soon, she could die. But the physical problems were just one part of the story. Jeanne was also dealing with emotional pain that ran deep. Like many people who appear on My 600-Pound Life, she had used food to cope with her feelings for years. She talked about being depressed, feeling hopeless, and not really seeing a future for herself. Eating gave her comfort, even when she knew it was making her worse. That cycle, feeling bad, eating for comfort, and then feeling worse, was something she couldn't seem to break. Then came a turning point in her story that no one expected. Her father died during the filming of the episode. He had been one of her main sources of support, even if he didn't always know what to do. His sudden passing was a massive shock to the family, especially to Jeanne. She was already struggling just to survive day to day, and now she had to deal with grief on top of everything else. At the same time, her mother, who was her full-time caregiver, was also dealing with serious health problems. She had her own medical issues and was clearly running on empty. The stress of taking care of Jen while also trying to manage her own health started to take a toll. At one point in the episode, Jan said she felt like a burden, and it was clear that guilt was adding to her emotional pain. All of this made it almost impossible for Jeanne to focus on her weight loss journey. She wanted to see Dr. Nowzaradan in Houston and try to qualify for weight loss surgery, but getting to that appointment meant taking a long trip, something that felt impossible in her condition. The show set up transportation for her, but in the end, Jeanne didn't go. She said it was too much, especially after everything her family had just gone through. For many viewers, this part of the episode was the most heartbreaking. It showed that sometimes life throws so much at a person that even taking the first step toward change feels out of reach. When Jeanne Covey's episode aired, it didn't take long for social media and online forums to light up. Fans of My 600-Pound Life had seen a lot over the years, but many agreed that this episode was one of the hardest to watch. It wasn't just the physical appearance or her weight. Viewers were mostly shocked by the living conditions and the emotional toll on everyone involved. Some people on Reddit and Facebook said it was the most depressing episode they'd ever seen. The moment with the garden hose became a major talking point. People couldn't believe that someone had to be clean that way, and it sparked a lot of conversations about poverty, caregiving, and how health problems can spiral when you don't have enough support. Others said the house looked like something from a hoarding show, and they felt bad not just for Jeanne but for her whole family. There was also a lot of frustration. Some viewers were upset that Jeanne didn't follow through with the doctor visit. They felt like she wasted an opportunity to get real help, but others were more understanding. They said it was clear that Jeanne was overwhelmed, grieving, and not in a place where she could focus on major life changes. To them, the episode was a sad reminder that not everyone on the show is ready for recovery, and that's a part of real life. Despite the negative reactions, many people showed compassion. Some shared stories of their own struggles with obesity or family caregiving. Others said the episode helped them realize just how serious food addiction and depression can get when they go untreated. Overall, Jeanne's episode stuck with people. It wasn't the kind of episode that left you feeling inspired or hopeful, but it made an impact. It showed the side of extreme obesity that most people never see, and it forced viewers to think about the challenges some families face behind closed doors. Whether people were disgusted, heartbroken, or frustrated, they all agreed on one thing. This episode was unforgettable.
And if you hadn't come to see me the first time and haven't had your infection treated, you'll be dead. The only way that you're gonna survive is if you start to take this seriously, but you're not.
Jeanne Covey's episode of My 600-Pound Life wasn't just about someone trying to lose weight. It was about what happens when life gets too heavy in every way, from the unsanitary living conditions to the emotional pain and family struggles. Her story gave viewers a raw and uncomfortable look into a world that's usually kept behind closed doors. There was no sugarcoating it. This was someone living in crisis, surrounded by people who cared, but who were also struggling themselves. Unlike many other episodes, Jeanne's didn't end with a surgery or a big transformation. It ended with questions about what could have been, what help she really needed, and how a family can get so deep into survival mode that they can't see a way out. It was sad, disturbing, and very real. That's part of what made it stick with so many people. While some episodes of the show are hopeful and uplifting, this one was a wake-up call. It reminded viewers that not everyone gets a happy ending, and not every story fits the mold of progress and change. Some are stuck, some are messy, and some, like Jeanne's, show the true weight of a life that's been neglected for far too long. Whether people saw it as a warning, a tragedy, or just the hardest episode to sit through, there's no doubt that Jeanne Covey's story left an impression. It might not have been inspiring, but it was unforgettable.